let's start with this the deal that Trump made it such a big deal that US and Australia has, the rare
Yeah.
earth. But we said it many times, rare earth is not that rare. The rare part is the refinery, right? It still doesn't address that, but he make it
Mm.
sounds like the problem solved. He's just bluffing, right?
He is bluffing. He's absolutely bluffing. I sometimes wonder whether Trump even understands this. I'm getting increasingly the sense, by the way, that Trump often forgets things that he's told or has
Uh-huh,
explained to him,
probably.
and just reverts to ideas that he has. But absolutely, you're absolutely right. Australia isn't in a position to refine rare earths. America is not in a position to refine rare earths. Rare earths are of can be found in American
Yeah,
territory
yeah,
itself,
mhm,
and they can be found in Canada and all kinds of places.
yeah.
This isn't the problem. This isn't the issue. And I was reading, you remember that French commentator, Arnaud Bertrand?
Mhm.
He's doing a very interesting piece about how one particular substance, which is, I believe, classified as one of the rare earths, is obtained. I mean, he doesn't go through the whole process, but he
Mhm.
describes part of it. And it is a byproduct, it turns out, of the aluminium smelting industry.
Yeah.
And he points out that in order to um, achieve equivalent levels of production, not just to what China produces, but to what the US uses of this particular mineral that, as I say, is a byproduct of this process, the United States would at least need to double the scale of its aluminium industry,
Mhm.
producing far more aluminium than at present it would be able to absorb. So, I mean, and that, as he points out, is just one mineral among lots of them. So, I mean, it doesn't remotely even begin to address this problem. And again, it's theater, it's show, it's telling the American people, don't worry, we've got this all under control. Well, they obviously haven't. And it's ultimately deceiving the American people again about the realities of their situation.
And he said in a year time there will be so much rare earth that we don't know what to do about it. Maybe that's true. Maybe in a year there will be a lot of rare earths that they don't know what to do
Well,
about.
that's exactly true. That's exactly what's going to happen. No,
And
I mean, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's going from one thing to another. I mean, we'll probably come to the Budapest summit and the chaos there, and it's symptomatic of the way in which he runs everything now.
yeah, so the problem with him is you can't take him too seriously whatever he does and says.
No,
At the same time, he is the president of the United States.
yes, I
You
know.
have to pay attention to what he does and what he says, but he changes all the time, right? He
Yes,
he first said, "Oh, 100% tariffs starting November 1st." And then he said, everything will be fine. We want to help China. And and then Vance came out and saying, "Oh, we have a lot of cards we can play. Sounds like very tough." And then he said, "Oh, we're going to have a fantastic deal," and he's planning to visit China. He got an invitation early next year. There will be a fantastic deal, and now it's not clear. I think the latest one is that meeting may not happen between him and Xi Jinping in APEC. So he doesn't know what to do, right? Is that
no,
what's
he
going on?
doesn't. He doesn't. This is absolutely correct. Can I maybe because it's the one I've been inside, let me just quickly discuss the Budapest summit
Mhm.
meeting and all of this,
Yeah.
which I think mirrors very closely what you have described. And basically, what happened is what I understand happened is this: Trump and Putin met in
Yeah.
Alaska back in August.
Mhm.
Putin believed that he'd come to an understanding with Trump on various things. One of those things was that Putin said, look, in order to move things forward in Ukraine, to move towards a settlement of, of the conflict in Ukraine, what we're prepared to do is if the Ukrainians withdraw from Donbass, we will consider your suggestion to ceasefire in these two other regions, Zaporozhye and Kherson region, where we are also advancing. So what do you say to that? And Trump said, look, I've heard that. I'm going to go off. I'm going to consult with people in Washington. I'm going to consult with our allies, and I'll come back to you. And then the weeks pass. He doesn't come back. The weeks pass further. He doesn't come back. The Russians are getting increasingly angry and frustrated about this. They then start hearing that he's going to supply or deploy, rather, Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Putin finally, who's under some pressure in Russia, calls him and says that this is absolutely unacceptable. If you deploy all of these missiles to Ukraine, then this is over. We're not talking with you anymore. And by the way, what is your response to what we talked about in Alaska? Mm-hmm. So Trump says, well, let's talk about it at another meeting in Budapest. So he puts it off to another meeting in Budapest. Then he has a meeting with Zelensky the following day. He tries to get Zelensky to say that he will do what Putin asked back in Alaska. Zelensky predictably says no. So what does Trump do? He calls off the entire summit because he doesn't want to give Putin, he cannot give Putin the positive answer that Putin presumably he thinks Putin is expecting. It was, by the way, Trump who proposed the summit meeting. Anybody who says otherwise is wrong about this. Putin did not telephone Trump to ask him for a summit. Putin telephoned Trump to ask him for an answer to the proposals that were set out in Alaska, and also to make clear the position on the Tomahawks. But it's exactly the same as what you have described. He just says one thing one day, he says something completely different the next day. He cannot stick to a plan or a proposal. He always criticizes others. He constantly says unbelievably rude things about other people in order to try to disguise his own indecision and instability. And of course, ultimately, it makes things worse. I don't know how much longer this can go on for. I think we're probably approaching that point. Certainly, I think we are with the Chinese. We probably are also with the Russians. When they're going to say enough, we've got more important things to do. If you want, let him go ahead and impose his tariffs. We can find a way around, but don't expect then that you can get our rare earths, which you'll just want to use to make more weapons against us. And I think that with the Russians, they're probably a little further back because Putin has spent more time trying to sort out something with Trump. But sooner or later, they're going to come to that same conclusion as well. It cannot go on like this. You cannot string China along. That is ridiculous. I mean, it's absurd. But that's what he's effectively been doing.
And as you said, he blames the others. So there are rumors, probably with some truth to it, is that he's very angry with the Lutnick. He blamed everything on Lutnick. Now, possibly Lutnick did just bring him the good news, and possibly, but he's the decision maker. He's the president. He needs to consult more than just Lutnick, right? He should making decision about any decision regarding China. He should consult more people than just one. And he's the one who had the final call. But apparently he blamed Lutnick. Now, we haven't seen Lutnick for a few days, possibly that he's afraid that he will say anything wrong or something. But that's not just a Lutnick problem. And I just don't see how, but he will blame it on others, right? It's
yes,
not
exactly. That's what he always does. And now it is inconceivable that Xi Jinping would ever be in that kind of situation. It is impossible to imagine that Xi Jinping would be relying on one official. I could tell you what. I mean, I don't know Xi Jinping, obviously, but I follow him. I read the things he says. I can tell you what he does. Xi Jinping works 15 hours a day. He reads every single document and paper that is there for him on any specific issue. he obviously has to discuss things with the members of the Standing Committee of the Politburo, and probably with the larger Politburo and with the various officials and ministers. He knows every part of every problem. He will have all the facts at his fingertips. So it is impossible to lie to him, because if an official comes along and spins a story, Xi Jinping can say, look, I've got all of this. I know all of that. I know all of this. You can't tell me that. That doesn't make any kind of sense. That is what the leader of a great country does. Trump doesn't do that. He doesn't read anything. I've heard this from people, by the way, who know him. He never reads anything. He doesn't ask questions of people. He just sits there. People come along. It goes from, he drifts from one thing to another. He hears what they tell him. He hears what he wants to hear.
Yeah.
They always tell him what he wants to hear, because they don't want to get on on his wrong side. So the result is it's chaos. You cannot run a country in this way, at least not a country like the United States.
And then, like for Putin, even let's say Trump said, "Oh, we're not going to give Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine," he could change his mind tomorrow. He can say,
Absolutely.
"Never mind, we will."
Yeah.
And it's also not just him. I think leader is so important because it is an example of the people under him, right? So Bessent also now blame everything on this Chinese official, Li Chenggang, right? He's very angry with Li Chenggang. He said that he came to Washington D.C. uninvited. What do you mean uninvited? If he came by himself uninvited, you don't have to meet him. But clearly they met, okay? And
Of
then
course they
he
did. I mean, they gave him a visa, for God's sake. I mean, how else could he have come? I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, this, I've seen, I was hoping you were asking that. I mean, this whole thing is, again, I mean, it's childish. It's infantile. You meet this man and you say, we disagree. That's a position. But to make up a silly story like that, and it's playground stuff. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And this is, again, the foreign policy of a great nation that's being conducted in this way. I mean, it's nonsense. And of course, it's everybody else who's to blame. Nobody, we are never to blame. We never do anything wrong. We're always perfect. We're always fine. It's terrible what the Chinese do. We never do anything like any of the things that the Chinese do. Anyway, never do. Anyway, what more to say there?
he also said that he said that Li Chenggang was very threatening. He said that China would unleash chaos on the global system if the US went ahead with the docking fees for Chinese ships. Well, that contradicts what they later said, because if he said that in August, well, then you shouldn't be surprised that when China introduced this rare earth mineral control, right? Then you should know that China is going to do something.
Absolutely.
So he contradicts himself, because later they said, "Oh, this is out of the blue. Why do they do this?" Well, you should know that in August.
Well,
So
of course, absolutely. I am absolutely sure that the Chinese have pushed back very strongly about the docking fees, which is outrageous. Oh, it's absolutely outrageous. It's an attack on China's maritime shipbuilding industry, which, of course, the United States is unable to compete with. And it's a childish, petulant thing to do again. And I'm sure that the Chinese, in the way they do, by the way, very politely, but very, very firmly, would have said this is completely unacceptable. But what the Americans say is aggressive is when people answer back to them. When the Americans are aggressive, which they often are, and they can be very aggressive. By the way, I've experienced this myself. I mean, I've had to negotiate with Americans, and I know how aggressive they can be and the incredibly bad language they can use sometimes. Of course, they don't call that being aggressive. They call it being tough. I mean, that's the difference.
yeah.